I'm going to call us to order at 6:02 and just make note that Liz Sayre is going to be our minute taker, which is great. Thank you. For folks that are looking at the Google Doc version of the minutes, you might notice that I added a couple of links to the top that are new. And if you don't see them on the version of the minutes that you're looking at, they are our revised charge and our governance policy that relates to this work specifically, and our communication structure and process. So those will be in the minutes in the everybody will be able to see those in the minutes, but I just wanted to let anybody know that's looking at it now that those were just recently added. Okay, so before we start with what we typically do, we have public comment and then approving our minutes. I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about this committee since we've got some new folks here and to share how we typically work. So we are a committee of the board. So we have board member representation.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Krista, but there are a couple of people that are not muted and it's very difficult for me to understand what you're saying. So if people would please mute themselves so I can hear what's going on, I'd appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So we're a mixed group of board members and community members, and we're a little less formal in how we operate during our meetings. But sometimes when we have lots of folks in attendance, we'll keep discussion to our core committee members and then open it up to the public after those folks have had a chance to discuss. So that's typically how we work. And I would like also to, after public comment, to take a few minutes to introduce a couple of folks that are here this evening that I think are going to be joining us more regularly. So let me just first see if there's anybody here that would like to make a public comment. And if you do, if you want to raise your electronic hand, which is in the reactions button on the bottom right, or you can just show your video and wave your hand and I can see if I can spot you. Okay, Brenda, go ahead. Hi, Brenda.
Hi. So I've been trying to work out some sort of proposal, and I found that the stuff from Nate Levinson was very interesting, but that seems to be off on a different tack than you are. That your committee has been headed on and the board. And I'm wondering what the timeline is for this at some point. Also, the idea of innovation schools worries me because we seem to, all teachers are innovative if they're a good teacher. And I've been thinking about all the innovative things we used to do and no longer do. We used to have a program called Genesis, which has now sort of devolved into a remedial program, but it used to work on the idea that all students have talents and all students should be interested, and that was held within the school. We used to have senior projects. I don't know if any of you ever came across those. I had a student who actually built an airplane. He didn't finish it his senior year, but he built it in his cellar. He flew it before he graduated from college. And of course, there used to be science fair. There used to be a science fair at Beeman. The Shakespeare plays at Lincoln. There used to be a lot of innovation. And I wonder what's happened to it. And if we're interested in innovation, how we can get it into the regular program again. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. And to your first question about our process, I think a little bit later in the agenda, we're going to provide an update that might address some of that. I see Rob's hand up. Rob, go ahead.
Thanks, Krista. My name's Rob, up in Lincoln. I am a board member, but I never know where certain comments will fall when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of a real agenda. So I'll make this comment now. But, you know, we all wear many hats. And for me, one of the hats I wear right now is a school board member, but that's a hat that at some point will come off, or I don't think my wife would let me back in the door at some point. But I will always wear the hat of being a member of our five-town community and school district. And, you know, what really got me engaged in thinking about wanting to participate more were the community engagement committee meetings held over a year ago. And today was the deadline for more formal proposals in regards to the future of the school district. And I just want to acknowledge, I haven't had a chance to really look at them thoroughly yet, but the amount of effort that folks put in, they stepped up to the plate. And I'm just really excited to dig into those, really thankful that folks put themselves out there and put a lot of work, energy, and effort into them. And I'm just really thankful that I live in a place where people are willing to invest their time, their energy, their passion, their expertise to try to help our kids and our communities. Because education, one lever of education is school, and education happens outside the classrooms. And a huge component of well-being in education is community. And so I'm just really thankful for all the folks that put in so much time and effort. And then I also see some names on the screen tonight of folks that have also put in efforts in different ways, whether it's letters or gathering coalitions of folks. And I'm just really thankful that we have such a strong community of people that care about our kids and our community.
Thanks, Rob. Does anyone else have any other public comment? Okay, so if I could get a motion from a board member to approve the minutes of our meeting on April 6th, that would be great.
I'll move to Krista to admit
Okay,
the
Sandy?
minutes.
And can I have a second?
Rob will second.
And Rob. Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from April 6th, please say aye.
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 I see you, Liz. Great. Okay, and the minutes are approved. I think that was all of us. So what I'd like to do is take a minute to do introductions. I know we did this a little bit. We did this last time as well, but we do have 3 folks that are here that I think are planning to be regularly participating as committee members. And so I wanted to give them a chance to introduce themselves and for us to introduce ourselves to them. So Coco, you're in my upper left screen. So would you just take a minute to just tell us who you are, the town you reside in, and anything else you'd like us to know?
Sure. Thanks, Krista. Hi, everybody. My name is Coco Mosley, and I live in Lincoln, and I'm a parent and a community member. I'm also the librarian at Lawrence Memorial in Bristol, so I consider myself a real five-town community member. And yeah, I'm looking forward to serving and participating on this committee, and I really think we have a great opportunity to bring together a lot of the leaders and folks who are stakeholders in our schools, which to me is really everybody in the community, to participate in this process and to really broaden how we solve problems, that it doesn't have to be on the backs of just the school board, that we can really think about collaborative solutions that look really holistically at all of the avenues for addressing the challenges we face as a school district and the opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Coco. Next person I see is Kim Callahan.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. I got my earphones and I just want to make sure they're working. I'm Kim and I live in New Haven. We have two girls that went through the school system that are both out of college now. And my passion and interest is bringing the 5-town communities together, and especially reaching those people that aren't, it's not their general nature to be involved or to come to meetings, to watch school board meetings on video, to take the time to really dig in to know what's going on. So my hope and reason I'm on this committee is that we can really reach out to all members of the community and everybody, because as Coco said, I agree that everybody is a stakeholder, and it's important that we don't talk to ourselves, that we talk to our communities. So yeah, it's nice to see some new faces here.
Thank you. Okay, Sandy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Lee. I am a relatively new school board member and new to the committee from the town of Lincoln.
Thanks, Sandy. Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm from Bristol, and I'm excited that the Community Engagement Committee is back up and rolling. So that's good.
Thanks, Liz. Nancy?
I'm Nancy Cornell, and I live in Starksboro. And I too am grateful that the committee is back up and running. I think it's certainly community engagement in our schools has always been a key to their success. And the work this committee has done in the past has really focused on process and bringing as many people in as we could. Although, as Kim says, we haven't been able to get everyone, but still. So I'm also the former associate superintendent of schools in this school, before this school district was consolidated. And I've been a board member in Starksboro, and I've been on the supervisory union board. And I'm also working on the broadband project for Addison County through the communications union district called Maple Broadband.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Hi, folks. I'm Mary, and I live in Lincoln. And I got on this committee about whenever it started, year and a half ago, as it was kind of an outgrowth of a bunch of people getting together, the 5-Town Forum, I think it was called, just trying to share the load and responsibility of how we can educate all of our kids. So yeah, so glad it's back. Glad the committee's back.
Thank you. Erin Buckwalter?
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Buckwalter. I live in Starksboro. I have two young boys, Wiley, who's 6 and at Robinson, and my son Birch, who's 3 and at the Lincoln preschool. I work full-time for a nonprofit called NOFA Vermont, but I also do a lot of volunteering. So I've been volunteering at Robinson on the Four Winds program, and I am the volunteer chair of the board at the Lincoln preschool. And my husband went to school at Robinson and Mount Abe, and our family has lived on our homestead for 7 generations. So we're longtime people here, at least my husband and his ancestors. And we're really invested in this community being a place that our kids will thrive and hopefully consider living in when they're adults.
Great, thank you, Erin. Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob Backlund, board member. This is my 2nd year now and served on this committee ever since. I live up in Lincoln. I have a daughter that just turned 2 this past weekend, and if all goes well, she'll graduate high school in the year 2037. So I definitely, obviously, as a parent, think about that, but also you know, her trajectory is directly tied to whatever trajectory we move forward with now. So I really appreciate this committee and what we really strive to do, and hopefully we can continue to find ways to engage our community as we move this process forward.
Thank you. And Erin Rubel?
Hi, I'm Erin. I live in New Haven. I have a daughter in fifth grade and a son at Mount Abe in seventh grade. And I've volunteered through the years at Beeman, and yeah, just feel like this is a great opportunity to connect with the community and engage in creativity. I appreciate all the effort that people are putting into it.
Thank you. Let's see, I think I've got, John, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dawn Griswold. I'm the chair of the Mount Abraham board, and I'm from Moncton. I have two boys who went through Mount Abe and the school district. One of them is currently in grad school, and the other one is living on his own in Essex. So I'm just glad to see new faces here and be able to take part in this meeting tonight.
Thank you. And I see a lot of other folks here. I'm going to just keep introductions to the committee members so we can get to know each other a little bit. But thank you, everyone, for being here, including board members and community members. And I guess I should just reintroduce myself, Krista Siringo. I'm the chair of the Community Engagement Committee and have two kids, twins that are freshmen at Mount Abe, and then a fifth grader at Bristol. And one thing I was just reflecting on as everybody was introducing themselves and thinking about this committee and how it really got going is that we're all connected to our community in so many different ways. And we all have lots of skills and assets that we bring to this work. And so it reminds me of how valuable that's been in doing the heavy lifting, because as a couple of folks have said, it's way bigger than just the 13 members of the school board. And our initial bringing together this committee was an ask of folks to help the school board ensure that we're really reaching out to as many people as we can. And I think that's a good thing for us to keep in mind moving forward. We worked really hard at the beginning of this committee coming together to find lots of creative ways to connect with people. And I think that's still the core of our work. You can take time to read the charge and the policy that connects all that. But that's really the gist of it is, how are we making sure we're connected to all the different folks in our community that are part of our district? And then also finding ways for those many voices to have some input into the decisions that we make at the school board table. So thanks everyone for being here. It's great to see you all. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to, or maybe more than a few minutes, but kind of update our group on where we're at, and especially for folks that are new or people that are here listening in. And I think in this update, we'll recognize, or at least I've been recognizing, that there is a lot going on, and there always seems to be a lot going on. And so that relates to our second agenda item, which is how are we going to make sure we're communicating all of this to folks effectively. So start off with, Rob mentioned that we had a deadline today for community members interested in submitting proposals to do so. And I know in my inbox I have at least 3, and there may be others that I don't know of. I'm really looking forward to digging into those. And I think the fact that we've solicited those proposals is a reflection on the process and how it's evolved from the board. First, asking for a recommendation from our superintendent, from Patrick Green, which he provided, and then opening up to the interest of community members in providing alternative solutions. So we've got all those, and And now we've got to figure out what to do with that. And that's kind of where we're at now as a board. We have committed to meeting twice a month, and we have been trying to dedicate one of those meetings a month to regular board business so that the other meeting can really be focused on this long-term planning. And where we're at now is trying to get our head around how to evaluate these proposals and how to provide opportunities for input. And so we are, another part of the update that I wanted to share is that we met with a consultant on April 13th, I think it was, so almost a little shy of a month ago now, who offered some additional insight into how we could move forward in this process. And to Brenda's question earlier in public comment, I think we're not quite clear how we're going to weave those recommendations from the consultant into what we do next. But he gave us a lot to think about. His name is Nate Levinson. He's worked with lots of school districts in Vermont and around New England. He's worked on specifically issues around declining enrollment and also around improving outcomes for kids who are struggling. And he presented some ideas about how to build trust, how to involve key stakeholders into the decision-making process. And then he also presented some alternatives to consider. So we have a lot to chew on, I think. And I'm going to pause and see if anyone that was at that meeting wants to add anything to that update about the meeting with Nate in particular and kind of where we are in our process. I know there were a number of folks at that meeting that are on this call tonight. Anybody that was there that heard something that really struck them that or resonated, or Nancy?
I was there, and I must say I went into that meeting feeling very skeptical about having a consultant. And my mind was completely changed in listening to him, especially because he was so emphasized the importance of the process that is used in order to come to a solution. And another thing that he said that I just really was so grateful for is I asked him a question about, well, what if, I mean, we're trying to plan for the school district, trying to plan for the future. And there's so many things that are changing and uncertain. And it's very easy for people, for many people, to feel doubtful about the assumptions one has to make in projecting forward. And I asked him if he had any solution to that, or if he, if he had any comment on that. And what he suggested was that people really take a look closely at assumptions and try to come up with 3 or 4 scenarios that are likely, and plan to those, but also to build like a staged proposal so that as one goes along, there are sort of dates where one checks on what assumptions have come true and what has changed. And so then one can shift one's planning depending on how things are turning out at different stages. And that, to me, was a very helpful way of thinking about it.
Any other thoughts that people had after that, being part of or listening in on that meeting with Nate? Sandy?
Thanks, Krista. Just like Nancy, I had some, not skepticism, but I wanted maybe a little bit. I was waiting to hear what Nate could bring, and I was hopeful, and I was happy to hear a lot of talk about how it's important to have a good process, not just a good plan. And so I was very heartened by that. In terms of as our role as a community engagement committee, I found it interesting his talk about small groups, the importance of having certain players, those groups really coming together and allowing them to do work, that it's hard to actually get substantive work done if the groups become too big and unwieldy. And so I thought, I know that at our last board meeting, we asked Patrick, and Patrick, we gave him the thumbs up in essence when he had a meeting yesterday with Nate Levinson to just talk about how we do want him to assist us in some way in this process. I'd love to flesh that out a little bit more, how we as the Community Engagement Committee can figure out how to help form these groups that might actually really be able to get some substantive work done, and then and we can contribute, but also they can report back. Because it's hard when groups get too big to actually move or actually gather all the information, or at least the burden, unfortunately, gets left on just a few who are very involved, and it's harder for others. So this to me seemed like a good way to bring those players together. And I'm looking forward to seeing in concrete ways, what he would suggest how we gather those groups together.
Thanks, Sandy. Rob?
Yeah, and to echo off of what Nancy said, I guess the take-home message for me that I still remember, and I won't have the quote exactly right, but the districts that I guess had the most success at the end of the day didn't necessarily have the smarter solution; they had the smarter process. And I know we've been engaged in a lengthy process already, but I mean, as a board member, I don't think it's been the smartest process, and so I just appreciated his emphasis on that, and then that balance of emotion with also more of the, I guess, hard data, the head, if you will, and I really appreciated that. And also, yeah, to Sandy's point, I think as we move forward, and a question I have for the committee members that are part of the community and not necessarily on the board, now that we have at the moment these proposals that have been delivered to the school board, like, what do people think we should do with them? Not only Nate, that's nice to maybe have a third party outside of the district, but what does our community want us to do with them as a board? Do we want those folks to, formally present? Are they going to be public? Are they, like what? So I'd love to have some, thoughts by the end of tonight if people have some to share. But no, I appreciated Nate's insight, and he's obviously, he's seen his work, I think, probably do wonders for districts, and also maybe has had some, I wouldn't say failures, but bumps along the road too. And so I just appreciate someone that has brought a lot of experience to the table. So that's where I was at with it.
Thanks, Rob. Coco.
Sure. Yeah, just to echo what everybody else is adding, I do think one thing that really stuck out for me was, again, the focus on process, but also on involving stakeholders in the discussion about possible solutions. He really charged us with investigating all the plans that come forward, no matter how possible or impossible they might seem, because that builds community trust and that builds engagement. And I think, I do appreciate the possible interest of him continuing to participate in these discussions, but I really think he also charged us as community members with, figuring out who are the stakeholders in our community from a broad perspective, and how do we bring those folks together to look at these possible solutions. So that's just what I wanted to add. Thanks.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Nancy?
Just one more thing. He went back again and again to the importance of the centrality that the principals need to have in helping to solve the issues we're facing. And I can't remember if he said it or if someone else said it or if I just thought it, but I mean, I can imagine that that most superintendents, including ours, would really want to protect principals from having to work on this in the midst of the pandemic, and even barring the pandemic, in the midst of all the things that principals are called on to do. But he came back again and again to the notion that it's going to be very, very important if we find an acceptable solution. It'll be in part because the principals were very involved in helping to devise the solution and understand the solution thoroughly and explain it to the community.
Kim?
And to just piggyback on what Nancy was saying, listening to him speak is one of the key things that he said about the principals is that they have to believe that there is a problem to be solved. And I think, you know, when I look at it from the lens of a community engagement committee member, the voice of the principals in our elementary schools may be very important. And having principals talk about the problem that we have with community members may be very important, and not that we need to task them with that or add to their plates, but the fact that those are important people in each of our communities is something that I heard him speak about. He did also say, let them do the fact finding, but I agree with Nancy. I mean, I just don't feel like that's something to add to the plate given everything that's going on. But within each community, there could be information that principals could share for us, for the whole 5 towns. The other thing that he talked about that I was particularly interested in is these people in our communities that are open-minded but haven't really decided how they feel about this whole thing, because they're still looking for information and they're still trying to figure out the best path forward. And I think us as a committee, that our big charge is to provide information that will allow that big and trusted group of people in our communities to have a real understanding of what the process is. First of all, what the problem is. Second of all, what the process is. And third, how do we engage them so that they can be part of the solution as well? So regardless of where we are, I believe that in the beginning. I heard Nate say it. We've got a process in place, but I think we really have to look at the larger community and make sure that people are sharing in the process. So, and I was particularly, I was a little skeptical, but I thought Nate he had a lot of real world experience. He was a school board member. He was a school superintendent. He was an engineer by trade, and a parent, an angry school board member, parent, that he said brought a lot of what he felt was experience in not really understanding what it was like. So he ended up getting on the school board, and then at some point was a superintendent. So I feel like what he brings, and I know there's people that are concerned maybe about having an outside consultant, but I think anybody that listens to him for 5 or 10 minutes understands. And we've always said we're not the only people in the world dealing with this. It's happening all over, and certainly in Vermont, but all over the country in rural communities. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can use the resources of people who have been through it successfully and seen it happen in other places. So I'm encouraged by his input.
Just checking to see if anyone has anything else to add. from the notes that I took of that meeting with Nate, I think folks have hit the highlights. And it's my understanding, and maybe the other board members that are on the call can let me know if I'm wrong, but I am pretty certain that we'll have some more information about the ways Nate can work with us when we have our next facilities focused board meeting, which will be next Tuesday. And I'm imagining, thanks, Don, I see the head nodding, and I'm imagining that when we have a better handle on what that might look like, this committee, and it was mentioned by other board members as well, is, in a great position to be really helpful in figuring out how best to get people involved in that, even around this idea of, trusted community advisors and, smaller groups. We have a really good list of folks that have participated in one way or the other in the engagement we've done over the past couple of years. So, I think it will be probably at this group's next meeting where we can digest what we've heard and how we can help on that front. But something that I think, was mentioned by Nate and by others here also is around the building and continuing to sustain the trust in the process. And so if people are okay with moving to our next agenda item, which is around communication, I'd really like to have us develop an action plan for that piece so that we're in good shape as things keep moving forward. Actually, I just remembered one other update that isn't about Nate, but that I think is equally important, and then we can move to that. So the last update that I was thinking of is that we had a joint meeting with the Addison Northwest Supervisory School District Supervisory District and our board, and we each board voted to come together and form a merger study committee, and we agreed upon a charge and a timeline. And I think the next step is for the boards to put together some sort of way to recruit people to participate on that committee with representation from both districts. So that process is moving forward. And it's a pretty ambitious timeline. The committee will have the right to alter that if they need to. I think they're going to be focused on really specifically on the question of whether or not a merger of our two districts makes sense. So the information that they're going to gather will be hugely helpful to all of the other information and proposals that are out there. But that process is moving along. And so, it's just another example of something that I think we want to make sure we're letting people know about and, as it unfolds. Nancy.
Thanks. I have a question about that meeting with Addison Northwest, if I could. I made some recommendations at that meeting about some changes to the charge, and that the board decided not to take in any explicit way. But one change the two boards did make to the charge, and this is the charge for their coming together meetings, was to change the word unified to union. And I'm curious about what you board members understand about the significance of that. When I thought about it, what I imagined that meant is that they were going to consider becoming one supervisory union that included both districts. That would be merging into a supervisory union. And they changed the word to union. And that's different from a unification where the boards, the existing boards, if it's passed, the existing boards disappear. There gets to be one board, a unified board, like we did when we were a supervisory union and became a unified district. There'd be one board any articles of agreement that exist between the existing districts would fall away in a unification. So I'm just wondering if the board members see that change in charge as significant.
Any board member? Rob, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I had definitely reservations myself about the original charge. I think where, and I've read through the statute, and by law, the path that this merger committee is going down, I would love more insight on this, I guess, from other folks too, is that it's really looking at the idea of a unified school district. I think the statute does say union, but my understanding, and again, please correct me, anybody, if I'm wrong, when I read the statute, VS whatever, all that, is that it's really looking at it sort of an up-down is becoming a single school district. The move we should go forth with. In regards to supervisory union, and again, looking at statute, my understanding, and again, this is limited, is that a supervisory union, that is a process that's taken upon either by the Secretary of Education or the State Board of Education, that then could draw the lines of what would be a supervisory union. I don't know if the merger committee would look at that and say, hey, maybe we should go to the state and say, we would like to be a supervisory union that contains Addison Northwest and historically Addison Northeast. But that's my understanding. I don't know if that change of language, the way that their board chair, John, framed it was to match the statute. That's my very basic understanding, Nancy, to answer your question. I too would like to look at the idea of a supervisory union personally within the entire county, but maybe for our two districts to merge into a supervisory union where you can keep two distinct school boards. A unified district, I believe we would lose that ability possibly. But again, please correct me.
I see a couple of other hands up, but I just wanted to see if there were any other board members that wanted to add to what Rob said around that particular question. Yeah, I would also just say I thought it was just to match the statute language, but I mean, I think there are a lot of questions moving forward and a lot to be sorted out. Mary?
I could follow up on that. Like, how does that whole conversation map onto the proposal timeline? Like, it seems like they're really connected, and I don't see how that one's going off, and we haven't really evaluated the proposals. So just for us to get clarity, so then the communication strategy can follow from that. And then the other thing is, I think last month at our meeting, we were trying to figure out how to evaluate the proposals. And I feel like we left it with like, let's marinate and figure out what we think about how best to evaluate these. And I was just wondering I assume that's what we're going to revisit tonight, just how to go about it, including all the amazing stuff that you guys said, Nate said about including stakeholders in this. So yeah, those are my two questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the timeline, I think, is totally flexed right now because of what you just pointed out. And I think, that's something we're going to have to figure out at the board level is what are they parallel processes? Does one inform the other? To the point about how we best communicate out to the community when that's still in flux. This is something that I've talked a little bit with Kim Callahan about is I think we need to figure out a way to communicate to folks even while things are in flux. So people know, because we're having a lot of meetings and things are happening, but they're on this weird level where there's not like a particular deadline or time frame or action item, but there's still movement. And so I think that is going to be a challenge. But to your second point about, this group providing additional feedback, I'd like to come back to that. So let's finish up this piece of the update, and then let's come back to that. Erin.
Yeah, I just was wondering, the proposals I've seen have really talked about merger at the middle school and high school level. And I was wondering if the districts unify, if that's going to have necessary implications or possible ramifications at the elementary school level too, which is, I haven't been to every school board meeting, but certainly at the community level, that wasn't discussed at all in Patrick Green's proposal or other ones. And I think that that's something we're going to need to make clear to people. If it is a possibility that the elementary schools are now going to be dealt with all at the same level, we need to make that clear to people.
Yeah. Kim?
Well, I was just, based on what everybody's saying, I think the key thing for us as a committee is to come up with a plan in a way that we can inform the community about what's happening and about the process. I think some of the details, we as a committee aren't going to be able to resolve those, but that our charge really needs to be how do we get information out to the community so that they have a level of understanding that everybody on the school board has, really, or at least a pretty good sense of what the school board is dealing with, and what a timeline. People will always look at a process like this and need to know what the timeline is. So I think that we have to put as much meat on the bones of that as we can in that communication plan. Some of the language, I think one of the things as a committee we need to figure out is, are we looking at these other proposals as alternative proposals to Patrick's proposal, or are they just more proposals? And I think that will be important as a way for people to understand what this process will be, even though we might not know how they're all going to get evaluated. We don't know who's going to be on the committees. But some of the things we have to decide is, are these alternative proposals to Patrick's, or are these just additional proposals? And then the other thing is, Mary said, how does the whole merger thing fit into this? Again, I think what we have to do as a committee is we just have to figure out how do we inform the community that this is happening. So, I think it's just a much bigger view of how do we share information, and then we as a committee, along with the board, how do we get input from the community so they can be part of the process? So I feel like those are the two big things we have to do as a community engagement committee.
So I'm wondering if we want, that's a good shift to that conversation, but I'm still thinking a little bit more about what you said, Mary, around our, how we left the last meeting, which was what recommendations does this committee have for the board about a proposal? And, we did hear a lot from Nate that kind of, opened things up in a really new and different way. But I do want to honor that request for this group and give some space. So can we take a few minutes to talk about that? Because, we're going to be going back next Tuesday as a board, and they're, you know, to make sense of what Nate has offered. But if there's a way for members of this committee to offer up additional thoughts from this group to weave into that conversation, I would appreciate that. So for the folks that are new, you know, the last time we met, this was before we had talked with Nate, and we talked about what a credible and transparent process would look like for the board to vet these various proposals. And, you know, we talked about what the pros and cons would be of the board doing that work on its own, or a mixed group of board and people from the community, and you know, a more diverse group doing that work. And we, you know, we went through the pros and cons, and we didn't really come up. I think we all felt like the mixed group was probably the way most of us were leaning. But maybe let's take a couple of minutes to talk about that a little bit more. What resonates with people and what do you think is important for the full board to know as we contemplate what Nate's offering? Kim, I can't tell if your hand is up from before or a new hand.
Well, I tried to lower it so I could raise it again.
Okay, well, you got the floor.
Well, you know, I remember the conversation about, we talked about the possibility of having some of the people who were on the strategic planning committee that wrote the strategic plan potentially being on a group of people. And one of the things that I heard Nate say is that if you identify trusted advisors in your community, and I think of those, you know, from my point of view, those are some of the trusted people in the community that sat down and really ironed out our strategic plan. I think it took 3 years to do it. There's a lot of educators that were on that committee, a lot of community members, and I sort of feel like you know, that those two things that we were thinking as a committee, and then to hear Nate echo that, it felt to me like that was a good direction, and that felt like something that we really should you know, use as an aspect. And I was also mindful of the fact that you need to have a school board committee or a couple of school board people on the committee, and then you don't want the committee to be too big. So, you know, how do you determine who those people are, and make sure you get a good mix? But yeah, I felt like those were two things that the same thing that we had said, that he had said, that felt right.
Okay, so I was looking down and taking notes. I don't know who's next, so I'm just going to go by the order I see you. Nancy.
Well, one of the things that I think Nate said that I'm sure was, well, I imagine was hard, especially for the board to hear and hard for Patrick to hear, was how important it is for the community and the principals to understand, have a common understanding what the problem is, for starters. And one of the things I think we could think about as a committee is what could we do to help people, including, I suppose, some of us, understand what the problem is. And I think he also said, I think he also talked about in the process of defining the problem, to lay out the array of assumptions that we have to contend with in solving the problem. We have to make some assumptions about what the legislature is going to do. We have to make some assumptions about what the threshold is going to do. we have to have an understanding of the actual dollar tax impact of going over the threshold, those sorts of things. And I thought, and please, other people were there, and maybe I misheard this, but I thought he was talking about almost not starting over, but making sure that the nature of the problem and the nature of the assumptions involved are well understood before we go further into the process of seeking a solution.
Yep. Great, thank you. Mary.
I'd love to hear Nance. I think that's a healthy thing to do, just to go over like, why are we doing this? But I'd love to hear what, if you think that there is a hole in that communication, if you feel like people don't get why we're doing this. So that's something that I'm just curious about. But I would say, like, if there's 3, 4, 5 proposals, I'm worried about the splintering that can happen. If like one group evaluates this proposal, another group evaluates this proposal, I feel like it should be smallish groups evaluating all 3, 4, 5 proposals and then coming back together. And in that way, principals, yes. And then teachers, yes. Like these, I mean, obviously these voices should be centered. And then strategic planning, I think that's brilliant to honor all the work those people did for years. And then community members. So if we can come up with like 4 or 5 groups that evaluate all proposals and then they come together somehow, I feel like that would be a trustworthy process.
Okay, Nancy, did you just want to respond to that first part that Mary was mentioning?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Mary,
sorry, I didn't know if that's why your hand was up. Otherwise, I'm going to make you wait and Coco gets to go before you.
Go ahead. Oh, to respond to Mary.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not sure that even all the board there are many days I feel like I'm not sure I understand the problem, and I feel like I've been immersed in it plenty. And I do imagine that there may be some board members and certainly lots of community members who don't fully understand what's the problem we're trying to solve.
Thank you. And I see, yeah, it sounds like Aaron agrees. Just my own comment on that is that I think we did do a lot in that respect, and I think we probably just need to keep doing it. Is the message? Okay, Coco.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to what Nancy was saying about, you know, the problem and the assumptions at hand. And, you know, I do think that we need to revisit that, because there's a lot of things that are in motion and a lot of things that are changing and shifting. And, you know, there's discussion at the legislature level of getting rid of the per pupil spending cap. And, you know, I think we really need to, you know, as stakeholders and as we involve other stakeholders, look really broadly at what are those mechanisms that are in motion and how do those adjust and change the way we operate and the way we can make decisions. And I know that it's so cumbersome. It's huge. It makes it an enormous process because it really feels like it involves so much input. But I truly think that in order to move anything forward, we have to get a little bit savvier about what's shifting and changing, especially since, you know, December and the sort of fall community engagement conversations, you know, and I think those still loom pretty large on the communication from the district, and on the website in general is still pretty out of date. And a lot of what is available is really based on some assumptions that haven't come to pass or have shifted. And so I do really feel strongly that even before we bring together stakeholders to evaluate proposals, we need to go back a little bit and rewind and revisit, and also bring in more community voices from across our towns. We need select board members and nonprofit leaders to contribute to an understanding of what's at play. Because so much of, I think, what we're experiencing as a school district is part of issues that, is the whole 5 towns are experiencing in various avenues.
Thank you. Sandy?
Thanks, Krista. Boy, making my brain just work listening to everyone. It's great. Lots of thoughts. So Mary, it's interesting. I'm trying to figure out more concretely, like how we're going to actually move forward. And one of the things you said made me think, I've been listing all the groups. So there were Nancy mentioned that, or Kim, the strategic planning members, there's principals, there's staff, the people, sort of the main representatives for people who put forward the proposals, who put a lot of that deep work into them, because I've already been looking at them as well. There's school board members, there's the student body, select board, our legislators, our representatives, because you made me think about that in terms of our assumptions, Coco. These are the people who are in there, they're working on that piece. What are they thinking? And then I thought, do all those groups separately look at when our board decides how we're going to start sort of evaluating these proposals, how we sort of package it, I guess. I'm not really sort of clear about that. I think it's a work in progress still for the board. But do then all those separate stakeholders, can they get really deep into it and meet themselves and say, what do we think, about all these possible options that are out there? And then do each of those stake sort of groups maybe then come together, like principals sort of really talk, and then maybe there's a larger community section that's more like, the select board, the community, and like we as a community engagement committee, maybe our charge will be, how do we show how we've packaged these proposals and get input from a larger group of community members, and then sort of distill that some way so they can take part in some of the more substantive smaller groups. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how do we, because there's going to be a bigger group of community members that we're going to have to really say, these are proposals. And also maybe these are the groups that are meeting and this is their thoughts, about it. Because I don't know. This is where it's beyond me in terms of understanding how, this is where I'm hoping Nate can be useful, of understanding of how do you truly get some real deep input from these very important stakeholders, allow them to really work it and give some really good opinions and speak about it, and then also let the community know about it. So I just put it out there because I don't know actually how this works. I imagine hopefully somebody has some more concrete thoughts.
Nancy, and then Kim.
I'm in terms of making sure everybody understands the problem that we're trying to solve and the assumptions at play. I think it would be possible for us as a committee to create something so that we're clear about those things, and then look to some different avenues for getting that message out to people, both both in in the newspaper and whatever social media we might want to use, and also in some meetings. As far as and I think it would be great to do that. That would be so character building for all of us. But in terms of vetting the proposals, and I have just with Herb Olson submitted a proposal, so I want you all to know that when I say this, I thought I heard Nate suggest small groups, as you were talking about working on that. I mean, he said vet the pros and cons of every single one with basically an open heart, with no prejudice, no bias at all. And I thought, and when it's going to be a lot of work. It's hard to imagine he talked about comprising those small groups of, for each proposal, the person or people who wrote it being part of the vetting process. I think he said a principal, but I'm not for sure certain he said that. I think he offered to be one of the people who would vet proposals. And it makes me wonder whether there might be different small groups vetting each proposal, but one or two people, maybe three, the superintendent, the business manager for sure, who would be part of vetting all the proposals. So, and that there'd be one kind of format for doing all the vetting. So the formats for vetting would be essentially the same. Although I think the proposals are coming in, I've seen a couple, and the proposals themselves are in very different grain size, very different formats. So, that will be a challenge too.
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I'm intrigued by this idea. I think, Sandy, what you were alluding to is the possibility of having small groups made up of, maybe a small group made up of all the principals, and a small group made up of select board members from all the different towns, and community groups that would get together to evaluate them. So then you get the expertise, the collective expertise of teachers as well. You get a group of teachers from all the 5 towns to sit and talk about them and identify the pros and cons from their level of expertise, which I think in a group where you've got the superintendent, the business manager, a select board member, a school board member, an outside person, a community member, a teacher, a principal, that everybody's got a perspective, which is really important, but are they going to really be able to work cohesively and in a way and deep enough that they're going to be able to really flush out all parts of a proposal? So this idea where you take groups of the same people that have the same responsibility, the same profession, the same role, they're the same type of stakeholder in the process, and you make groups of those people to look at the proposals. And then those people come back, and as principals, they say, these are the reasons why we think this will work. The select board members say, these are the concerns of this proposal that we have, or this is the one we think is going to be best for our town. The community members or parents, you could even have a group of parents with kids in the school, which is a group that I'm not connected to because my kids are older, that I just would really want to have their voice at the table as well. And to try to create all these different groups and add all of those sort of constituencies in would make a very big group. So I'm just intrigued. And Sandy, I don't know if that's what you were saying. I'm intrigued by that idea of setting it up that way. And I think it could be pretty meaningful in a process that would come from perspectives that would come from a lot of different places.
Can I just comment real quickly, Krista? It is kind of what I was thinking, because sometimes in those kind of groups, I think people who are coming from a common experience can really share and feel comfortable sort of sharing and really talking about what their concerns are. And maybe as a community engagement committee, if we can help to put those groups together to hear what they have to say, then we can gather that information and maybe then provide it to wherever it needs to go, like to a smaller group. And we can really say, these were like select board members who from all the towns, and this is when they all talked and really fleshed out what their worries are. These are their perspectives. And then maybe when there are small groups, those same people, some of them, maybe a representative will decide to take part, will be also taking part in the other kind of decision making of the mixed stakeholder group. But at least maybe we can help facilitate really getting from each sort of stakeholder, what you were saying, a deeper feel, and like and allowing and inviting them. So like you were saying, like parents of younger kids, maybe they feel, oh well, you're going, I'm going. So they take part in a Zoom meeting where they're like, okay, we all go to the school, we're here, and they can feel like free to talk. And maybe the teachers have sort of a separate meeting where maybe they can express things without being worried about it's anonymous, kind of sort of quasi anonymous, but they can express their feelings and concerns and what they think, and I bet a lot of them have very similar views about in terms of the education for the children. So maybe, but that's what I was thinking, Kim.
Thanks, Mary, for getting us to revisit that. What I'm thinking of, and let me know what you all think about this. I'm thinking that maybe I can try to summarize what I've taken some notes and try to summarize what I've heard from everyone, and share it back out with people before our meeting of the board on the 11th to see if anybody has anything to add to what I thought I heard. And then we can share it with the full group. Again, there's a couple board members here, or there's a number of us here, some on the committee, some not. So there are a bunch of people hearing it, but maybe I can try to organize our thoughts a little bit more and bring that to the table along with what we've heard from Nate. Does that seem like a good next step? Liz?
And I would hope one of those groups would be a student group, right? Get a student group in there as well. I mean, maybe not for maybe for the proposals. I don't know. I just want to keep trying to find ways to get the kids involved. That's all. Thanks.
Hey, Tori, go ahead.
Hey, everyone. I spent quite a while being distracted by how Sean was smiling the entire meeting until I realized it was his picture. So now I'm focused on the conversation and not just how joyful Sean looks all the time. So I have a few thoughts. I'm thinking back to what Nate said about involving principals, and then the idea of trusted advisors. And it seems like the purpose of those two groups is that they're groups that already have a fair amount of knowledge about the district, albeit from different perspectives. And so what I'm wondering about is having those two single groups, but have those groups be charged with getting ideas and information and opinions from other constituents that are sort of related to them. So for example, principals could very easily get information from teachers. I don't think that there's tons of people out there who are going to want to pour through the proposals or have the expertise to really sort of tease out differences and figure out similarities and so forth. So that's one of the things I'm thinking, is just have, really focus on getting people who are already involved doing the really difficult work. I had another thought. I think that one of the things that Nate said that really struck me was that you only get so much from community forums. And I feel like the board has done, and this committee has done, a really stellar job at providing a lot of opportunities for input. And you've heard from a lot of people, but I think there just comes a point at which the work needs to be done on a different level. So I might suggest the single groups one of them being the trusted advisor group. And the other thing that struck me about what he said about trusted advisors is that you're really looking for people who are open-minded. And that really struck me as an important quality, because I think we're all wrestling with some pretty significant and complex problems around declining enrollment, costs that are always going up, issues around lack of housing, broadband access, and so on and so forth. So I think, I think we need to be open-minded, and I think we also really want people who are open-hearted. And I think that's a quality that can be really difficult for each of us to call up in ourselves when we're really facing some painful and unknown and scary issues. So I think the open-hearted part is really important, so that we can really encourage one another to enter this process and engage in this process in a way that we're willing and able to handle our disappointments, as well as really keeping an open heart and an open mind, so that we can see opportunities and possibilities that we won't see if we're closed, and if we have a response that is, we already looked at that, or we considered that. I think Nate's idea, as difficult as it is to think about sort of going back in the process, is really important to re-enter it with more open-mindedness and open-heartedness. And I think that if we want to have more voices, that can be done really effectively through principals and trusted advisors in different ways. I think groups like select boards, I'm going to really simplify what I think select boards would say, but I think select boards would say, we don't want to do anything that's going to diminish or damage the character or viability of our town. My guess is that it's a pretty straightforward statement that a lot of select boards would make. Thanks.
Thank you, Tori. Dave Sharp, and then Mary.
Thank you. So I was right with you, Tori, till the last comment about select boards. Having sat on the select board, I would think that there are some open-minded people on the select board, as well as other places in the community. So I don't dismiss them out of hand, although their job as a select board member is to think of their community. So I get that. But I was right with you with regard to the open-mindedness and open-heartedness. We have a crisis here, not just with COVID, not just with reduced students, not just with political and emotional conflict among our citizens. It's also among our pupils, our students, who are going through a very difficult time in their lives, and we need to do a better job educating them and helping them be successful. So I agree. It's really, really important that we go through this process with an open mind and an open heart, trying to think about what's the best future for the educational system of our 5 towns or our county. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Mary, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Tori, it's so great that you're on this call. I just didn't realize until you showed up. Like your face showed up. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you maybe help us think of any way that we could make, I guess, to be totally honest, is it totally clean for the principals to be speaking about this? Or is there anything that we should be mindful in creating a process that would allow a true vetting of all these things? I mean, you are the experts in the room. So how do we make it so we can really hear from you?
I first want to just respond to something Dave said, because the select board in town knows where I live. So I do want to clarify that I don't think they're not open-minded people. I was saying that, I think by nature of being on the select board, their interest is in their town first and foremost. That's all I meant to say, Dave. So yeah, don't repeat that about me anywhere out there. So I think, I think that it's up to the board and working with Patrick to figure out what's a reasonable process to engage principals. And I think after Nate brought that idea up repeatedly, that I think it's a reasonable idea. It's just a question of how to make it really work well. And I would imagine that that's something the board would be taking up.
Okay, this has been great. How about maybe Sandy will have one more comment on this and then shift to some of the communications process.
Thanks, Krista. Thanks everybody for comments. I think it's just great. So just because I'm new to the committee and how it relates to the school board, Krista, sounds like we're gonna thank you for summarizing and trying to pull this together so we as a board, when we come back together, can try to figure out how best to pull all of this together. One of the things, and I don't know if Tori, you can choose not to answer or not, is it's hard sometimes because I want to ask very, specific questions, and I'll probably ask Patrick, say, Patrick, this is not an easy process for her to decide some of Nate's suggestions on how to include, principals' inputs and staff and teachers. Do you have an idea of, this is me saying to Patrick at a board meeting, do you have an idea or a proposal of how that would happen? Because it's, because in the end, he has the, the ability to pull people together, right? And to organize these groups. And I imagine that's part of what we'll be discussing with Patrick next week, with hopefully some additional considered input from Nate. Because I'm hoping he also can give us a little bit more granularity, like how can we actually, move forward and make this possible. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your email, Krista. I will look for it and put some thoughts in there, because it'll be an interesting meeting on Tuesday, because it's always interesting on how we move together to try to figure these, detailed things and how they actually come together. So I'm looking forward to it, but I also still feel really challenged on, the way.
Coco?
Krista, do you mind if I just make one quick comment?
Go right ahead.
It doesn't have to be running through my head all evening if I don't say it, but just going back a little bit to the discussion on select boards being involved in the process, I want to make a distinction between their involvement in evaluating proposals, but also really their involvement in contributing to solutions. When I think about stakeholders being a part of this process, it's not only looking at the proposals and coming up with the metrics of evaluating them, but also being involved in thinking about what are the levers that we can shift? What are the mechanisms that can bring more people to our 5-town area? I know lots of families, young families with 1 kid, 2 kids, more kids on the way, who want to move to the 5-town area but can't find a place to live, right? And so I think when we look at the bringing stakeholders together, it's not just evaluating proposals. It's really looking at how can we all be involved in shifting the levers that are contributing and exacerbating the problem. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. And I hope that when we think about how we're going to communicate out to our different constituents, that is a group we can target. And, we have before specifically targeted and reached out to select boards, and I think we'll continue to do that. Okay, I want to move us to, and I know your hand is up, Nancy, but I do want to move us to talking about how we're going to make sure we're letting folks know about all the things that are happening. And so if we have time at the end, I'd love to hear your thought, Nancy, or maybe just put it in the chat or add it to the email that I sent out to the group. And for the new people on the call, I do try to be really mindful of time and end on time when we can. So I think what I'm really interested in is reining in this information that we want to get out to folks in some sort of an organized way. And we did a really good job of that, I think, in the fall leading up to hearing Patrick's recommendation. We had video shorts that went out. We had regular posts on Front Porch Forum. We did some work on the website, and we had a pretty good plan in place. And I'd like us to go back to developing a similar plan. And the way that seemed to work well last time was we had a subcommittee of folks who that was their focus, was working out the logistics, but that we would generate ideas around content with this larger group. And I should also say, as far as procedure goes, and I think somebody was asking about that before, we would need to run communication by Patrick and Dawn. We usually have some sort of vetting process for how we get the message out to make sure it's accurate. But this group has been tremendous in helping with the heavy lifting around that. And especially with Kim Callahan's help, because this is her work. And so at the last meeting, she had the idea of looking at the Addison Independent as a platform that might capture folks who don't necessarily tune in regularly to Front Porch Forum, who aren't necessarily on social media, just a way to connect with a different demographic or to add exposure to a demographic of folks who are paying attention. And we presented to the board proposal to run a column weekly in the Addison Independent, and depending on how much we had to say, it could be an eighth of the page or a quarter of the page, but to have a weekly presence around this topic in particular. And I think the idea is that the content we would develop for that could be easily shared out in other ways as well. So it would be kind of a template, and that it could be pushed out in all the other channels. At the time that we were thinking about starting this, we were keeping in mind this idea that the board would potentially be making a decision at our August retreat. And I think it's safe to say that that's probably not going to happen at our August retreat. I think we're going to be needing more time than that. So we have a little bit of breathing room, I guess, is my point. That but I'm interested in talking a little bit more about what such a campaign of getting the word out might look like. Like to ask Kim to maybe share her thoughts, and if I could put you on the spot, Kim, of what we can focus on. And then I'd love some volunteers to work with Kim and I on staying on top of that content, because it's so much work and it's so important. And as others have noted, information gets out of date really easily, and people get lost in the myriad of things that they have going on in their lives. So this is a really good role for this group. So Kim, can I punch you?
Yeah, I think, as I said at the beginning, that, I feel like the goal and the reason why I'm part of this committee is to get as much information out to our communities as we can, and to do it without bias, to do it, we all have personal feelings about our own schools, and, so that can be a tricky thing to do. But at the same time, we don't want anybody to say, well, I didn't know anything about this, which is the worst thing that could happen. So that really, the more information we can get out to people and the more places we can do it. I know in our town, a lot of people aren't on social media. Front Porch Forum, if they happen to be looking at their computer that day, they might see it. So it's really, that's not a reliable place to put all the energy. So it has to, my feeling, it's got to be as many different platforms as we can. And I think we did a brochure last year. And the problem with that is because things are changing so much. Well, A, it's very expensive, but B, things change so fast. By the time you develop the content for it, the time it gets printed, the time it gets mailed, the time somebody reads it, things have already changed. So the nice thing about a paid column in the paper is that it's something people can look forward to. It's a place where we can simply provide information about the process. And if our goal is to build confidence in this process, then the communication that we do would go across all those places and be consistent in keeping community members up to date about what's happening, the merger committee, the select board, this committee, the work of evaluating proposals. I think there's a lot of people that don't even know there was a call for proposals, honestly, that people just aren't aware of the fact that has gone on. So I think backing up, identifying the problem, identifying the process, and then continuing to talk about the process, and then finding places where we can ask for input from the community. And one of the things that we thought about that worked really well sort of during this last year up to Patrick's proposal was working within our own communities we have a list of 150 people here in New Haven that we would just keep updated about what was going on. And we're constantly inviting people just to be on that list and providing information about all of these things within our small towns. And again, without bias, that's difficult because we all have very personal feelings about our towns, but finding a way that we can communicate out to people that aren't in any of those other places. So the more places we are, the better chance we have of accessing more people. And I feel like that's ultimately our goal is good communication, making sure everybody has information and making sure everybody has the opportunity to provide input if they want. Does that make sense?
Erin.
Sorry. I think that sounds great. And I think one of the advantages of having a paid column that you have a deadline coming up regularly is there usually is something happening, but sometimes you sort of want to wait to get the word out until you feel like you have a more complete understanding of what to report. But actually even saying that no news is happening is meaningful. And I think it really cultivates trust to say, we just got the proposals. We're in the process of evaluating them now. This is what we think the timeline will be. This is subject to change. I just wanted to add, I think that the Community Engagement Committee website can be a real asset, especially if we have all these other forums and we're constantly to it. So it would be great to have all of the proposals on that and have one page at the top. And I also think that page should be updated to have the new things at the top. So the very first thing that you see when you get to that website is here's a link for the new proposals, and then people can just click through them and see how many there are. And I also, as I've talked to people over the last few months in all the different towns, there have been a lot of questions that have come up about Patrick Green's proposal, for instance, that a lot of people shared the same questions. And so as we continue to talk to people or get feedback, we could even have like a feedback button on the website where people can submit questions. And if there are questions that recur, it would be great to have some input from for instance, if it's about a particular proposal, if we get 4 or 5 questions that seem kind of similar about that proposal, try to investigate it and have the answer right there on the website, or put that in our weekly update, so that it becomes more of a community conversation. And that I think it would would reduce frustration on the part of the school board or the administration who have to answer, I'm sure, the same questions over and over, but it also reaches out to the community who a lot of them are thinking along the same lines.
Thank you. Kim, or no, sorry, Nancy.
I think these are great ideas, and I think it'll be important to follow through with them. I do want to say something about Kim's idea of without bias. I think that what we explain about the process, it's very important to do that. But I also think that it's important for people to understand what the issues are about the process. And I wonder if there may be a way to explain issues with multiple points of view displayed, like along the lines of some people will feel this is blah, 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 blah. Other people will worry that, rah, 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 rah. I mean, just so people are thinking about what are the issues about this process? What are the issues about this problem? What is at stake? What is not at stake? Where are the levers, as Coco says? You know, I mean, so I think there's a way to do that without being biased, or there may be. I hope that there is.
Coco?
You know, I just want to put out the idea that I don't think there really is a possibility of not being biased, because we all have perspectives that we bring to conversations. And it's honoring those perspectives and making them visible that gives us the ability to build trust and credibility with folks. And so Nancy, your comment really struck a chord for me in thinking about this as not just a voice of the Community Engagement Committee or of the school board, but really voices from the MAUSD district. And we bring in folks, all the folks that have been engaged over the last, couple of years to really share perspectives and engage in conversation that can then be distributed throughout the communities, so that we work against what I feel like, I'm going to struggle to articulate this because I haven't totally figured it out, but what I feel like we're seeing is the presentation of a unified MAUSD board or perspective being put out into the community, and then the voices of dissension kind of bouncing off of it continuously. And instead, I'd like to pivot that and really instead have a conversation between the many voices in the district, the many perspectives, the many experiences and expertise that folks bring to the conversation. We have Bill Jedsdale, a long-term educator and principal and community member who's been engaged in a lot of these meetings. And how great would it be to see Bill in conversation about identifying the problems, identifying the possible solutions or areas where we can navigate change. It really broadens the scope of what this newspaper thing could do or communication thing could do, but I think it could address some of the challenges I think I'm seeing and feeling personally as a community member trying to engage in the process. And the one thing I'm reluctant to really sort of be gung-ho about with an advertisement in the Addy Indy or something is if it really continues to come from the same perspectives that are visible on the website. And does that resonate with anyone?
Yeah, I'm having trouble following that a little bit. I think, you know, from my point of view is that we want to make sure the community has information about the process. You know, and it's just like, it's that simple, you know, from my point of view as a committee member, and as, you know, trying to get as many people in this community aware of the problem, of the process, and of the solutions that are being put forward. Like that's all. But what I have found, and is Aaron still here? You know, when we were having conversations here in town, you know, people had their opinions about it, and people were willing to share what they thought about it. And so it opened the dialogue. But what I was saying, like, if I had gone into that conversation with a specific perspective, I'm not sure I would have been more trusted. I think there would have been people that may have disagreed with me that would have been less likely to engage in the conversation than if I was saying, here's information, here's the process, here's what's happening, let's talk. So that's what I'm saying. You know, as a committee member, I want to make sure, you know, if I could knock on doors to every person in my town to say, hey, let's have a conversation. I just want to tell you what's going on. And I wouldn't be trying to convince anybody of anything. I would just want them to know so they could join the conversation. So maybe that's altruistic, and maybe it's, you know, maybe that's not viable, but I really think that the more information that you can give people, the more opportunities there are going to be for them to find their way into the conversation in a way that feels comfortable to them.
So really just kind of sharing where the community is in the process and not necessarily engaging in the conversation. I do think it might be worthwhile to finding ways to engage in the conversation that comes from more perspectives than just this sort of branded MAUSD.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's talking about a branded MAUSD. It's more, here's what's happening. And I think the problem is, like, if you put something in the paper where you're starting to, you could pose things as questions. You know, many community members have brought up the question of how would it work if we blah, 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 blah. So that we could pose those questions that other people have had so that it gets people thinking, as opposed to trying to spin it. Like, it shouldn't be spun at all, either whether it's to MAUSD or it's to one point of view. I really feel like our role is to just make sure people know what's happening and where the access points are for them. And it's important that we identify those access points so that we're providing them with places, and whether it's within our own communities, or we do these small groups to evaluate proposals, and we get some parents with young kids, parents with high schoolers, we get students from each of our towns, and those groups come together in 5-town collectives and have conversations and talk about the proposals. You know, we have to find those points for input for sure. Does that clarify it a little bit?
It does, yeah. Thanks, Kim.
Okay.
Erin.
Well, Kim, before you said kind of posing it as questions, that was going to be my suggestion. I mean, I feel like there are so many questions that people have, and even, you know, I feel like I'm a pretty engaged community member, but I have 2 young kids and can't attend every board meeting, or even half of them, and trying to like understand the ramifications. And, you know, I'll just use the question I posed earlier about, like, well, if we go over the threshold by what we assume we might go over, what is the actual implications on my taxes, or, you know, a range of tax brackets of homestead values, so that people can actually say, like, oh, that's more than I thought it would be, or that's much less than I thought it would be. And that can inform people's conversations. And I feel like there's I think a lot of unclarity, which is, not clearness. I'm not sure what the right word there is. I'm making up words, but about what the problem is and kind of how things are changing, like what are we seeing that's changing because of the federal tax money that's coming in? What are we seeing that's changing because of people that are really relocating here because of the pandemic? Or, like how has that changed since the proposal came about, or since kind of the problem was earlier defined? And I think keeping, if every week we could have a portion of it defined or kind of assigned to answering some common question or helping to help people understand the problem, I think that would be really useful.
I know one of the things with Patrick's proposal that we did was to have a FAQ where, because the school board was getting a lot of questions and a lot of them were the same questions. So Krista, I don't know what that process was, but I know Jennifer would take the question, get the answer from Floyd or from Patrick or somebody on the school board, and then put the answer to that question. And I think that could be a good tool if it's almost in real time, where people can just type the question in themselves and the question appears and then the answer shows up later. So somebody can see that, so a community member can see like, oh, I was thinking the same thing. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to look to see what the answer to that question is. So if it's done and it's, it does require a little bit of manpower to do it, but it's, it can be a really good way to engage people in conversation and but it's got to keep flowing. So people have to see like, oh, I had a question. Oh, somebody answered it. Oh, I have another question. It got answered again. And then somebody goes and says, oh, that was the exact same question I had. Here's some information. I have more questions about that answer. That it's sort of a live document almost that's living and breathing and constantly changing. So that could be another possibility if we could make that happen.
Yeah, but I see your hand, Nancy. Before we go to just a couple things I was thinking of that I wanted to chime in with. One is to your point, Coco, I hope and think that we will, it's not a either or. I think it's really important for us to have a way to keep getting information out about the process, because people are at different levels of engagement. And it's really important that we have a clear way for people to know what's happening, and also ways for people to have those conversations. And I think that might evolve through the proposal process. But I think I hear what you're saying, and that's kind of a more of like a narrative or maybe a different approach, in addition to this effort to just, get a little bit of a better handle on keeping people up to speed with where we're at. The other thing I wanted to say is we do have the FAQ, and it is has been revitalized, and Patrick and Floyd have been answering questions. And, I think we have a pretty limited, we don't have a lot of capacity in our central office in terms of web management. I mean, the person who's doing it is Patrick's executive assistant, who's learning on the fly with a fairly basic platform. So I think we're somewhat limited in how interactive we can make it. But what we could do is, if we introduced a question at the start of a column and then directed people to the FAQs and as a place to find other answers to questions. I mean, there's maybe just some different ways we could deal with that. So those were the two things I was thinking of. Let's see, Nancy?
I think that people definitely need information about what's going on. I keep getting phone calls or emails from people who say, could you just tell me what's going on? And there's so much going on that I say, well, why don't you give me a call? And then I'm on the phone for like an hour talking to people. So there must be a way to do that part. But I also think, you know, an FAQ is great if there are answers, but there's a lot going on that isn't settled yet. So, I mean, just 2 examples. We can tell people that the board solicited proposals and that so many have, a certain number have come in as of today. But we don't know, you know, there's so many things up in the air about those proposals, how they're going to be vetted. Is the board going to consider taking a piece from one proposal and a piece from another proposal? You know, all those kinds of questions. And so, although, and another example as well, so now we have 2 districts that have agreed to meet in a study committee. And most people who aren't thinking about this say, oh, okay. But I think people need to know that could mean that they're going to talk about job sharing and sharing functions across the 2 districts. It could mean that they're going to form a supervisory union, or it could mean that they're going to recommend, you know, there are a lot of places it could go, and people need to know kind of the range of implications anyway that we can imagine. And there must be a way of explaining that. I get your point, Kim. There must be a way of saying something about it could mean this and it could mean that, or it could mean something we haven't even imagined yet, without, so people have a chance to think a bit more deeply about implications of whatever is going on. I mean, I think there's a fine line, but I imagine we could walk it.
Okay, I'm going to, I see Dave's hand up, and then after that, I'd like to talk about next steps so that we can end on time. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. So I think perhaps we're confusing process with engagement. I think we do need to inform people of the process, but we also need to engage people in the conversation. We don't want to just be telling them this is the process, this is a process, this is a process. The process should be engaging those people in what their reaction is to the proposals that are put forward, what their biases are, what their goals are for the kids in the community. So I think it's a both and situation. And certainly, as Nancy said, it's a fine line between open-mindedness and bias, and we need to practice both. We need to keep an open mind, recognizing our own biases and the biases of others, and then we can have an open conversation and hopefully come to a good conclusion. Thanks.
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking for next steps. Let me know what everybody thinks about this idea. If you are interested in rolling up your sleeves and digging into this a little bit more in terms of helping to flesh out a plan for how we are going to provide information as it evolves in different venues, and that would include letting folks know there'll be opportunities to engage with this. Please let me know if you'd be interested in being part of that. And what would be great is if a group could get together in the next week or so that we can map out a timeline for communication that we can ideally implement. The 3rd week in May would be a great target. So yeah, folks, if anybody here that would be willing to participate in that, or eager and excited to participate in that. Kim, thank you.
I'm interested in participating, but I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around the process and the trajectory that the board is going in to even understand it enough to communicate it clearly and openly. So I do think, you know, there has to be some advocacy to the board about, you know, not causing this sort of consistent seasickness that's happening in our communities, because things keep shifting and changing, and we're soliciting proposals while we're also pursuing a study committee for looking at, you know, joint districts. And that's something I'm just concerned about, you know.
Well, and it would be my hope that there'd be, Krista, I'm assuming you'd be part of this, or
Yes.
another school board member,
Yep.
that we would have to rely on the school board members to kind of fill that in. And it would also be, in my mind, I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe we need to talk about this. And I like the way Dave phrased it in terms of being mindful of biases while keeping an open mind. That if the column, you know, is this a column of the Community Engagement Committee, or is this a column of the school board that's going to be in the paper? And so then it becomes something that the school board needs to sign off on. And then who has the authority to do that? Does it have to be agreed to by the entire school board? So I guess maybe the school board folks need to clarify that a little bit. So yeah, Coco, I think that we would have to rely on people that are in the thick of it to provide us with the details to be able to share them. Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, I didn't know if you asked folks if willing to volunteer. I'll hop on as long as it doesn't include a survey.
Promise.
But I mean, I think nuts and bolts, we can't advocate, right? With whatever we communicate, we can't advocate one position or another. Am I correct in saying that? Legally, right?
Yes, correct.
And so, you know, I'm just thinking, like, at the moment, like, I guess maybe we can't even advocate for continued engagement. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but you know, really just sort of at the moment, we do have some nuts and bolts. And yeah, those nuts and bolts might change, timelines might change, but and I think what people have said, like, we got to work on getting just those nuts and bolts out there with the humility of saying these could change to as many people as we can, as soon as we can. And when they do change, continually trying to reach those folks along the way. And, you know, in thinking about engagement, you know, the point of engagement, if someone's reading something, that's where, if we can somehow solicit some way that they can give input, whatever that input may be, like you guys are all crazy, that's at least input from a community member. And that might be the only time they engage. So as we move forward in this process, thinking about when we do communicate, and if we get someone at a point of engagement, is there a way we can get feedback from them at that point? That's another side tangent for another day, but I'll hop on.
So yeah, my ask right now is really, you know, I'm just going to advocate for the board and say that it would be great to get some information out at the basic level of where we're at in the process, not these other issues, not putting them aside, but start with that and to keep building on these conversations. And so if folks are willing to help frame that conversation so we can get it out there into the universe, that would be great. And welcome participation from any of you that would like to do that. So it sounds like we have a couple folks that maybe we can loop back via email after this meeting and find a time when we're all available to get together. Nancy.
I'll hop on too.
Thank you, everyone. So we're at 8:01, and before we end, I just want to say how great it is to be with all of you, because this is the work, and I really like this community for the way, or this committee. I feel really grateful to be able to chair this particular committee because this work is just so important, and I like that we're able to do it in this fashion. So thanks for being part of the conversation. I think Nancy had asked me earlier if it would be good to let folks know how you can be on the committee. And if you're not a board member, it's pretty informal. Anybody is welcome to join in the conversation at any time. So glad to have you all here. And thanks to our minute taker. And before we conclude and go to public comment, is there anything else that anybody has on their mind that they didn't get to say and don't want to lose track of?
I just want to thank you, Krista. I just want to thank you, Krista, for your work and your kind of chairing the Community Engagement Committee and just being really open to inviting folks here. So yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Anything else that's on people's minds? And anyone from the public that's here that wants to chime in? Okay, well, we have our work cut out for us. So I'll take a motion to adjourn, and I'll be looping back with everybody on the 2 things I said I would do, which I wrote down, so I won't forget.
Thank you so much, Krista. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And can I get an official motion from somebody on the board to adjourn?
So moved, Rob.
Thanks,
Andy
Rob.
seconds.
Yep.
And a second. Okay, so we're adjourning at 8:03. All right, have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Krista.
Bye.